Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us in this, I guess, very much waited or anticipated AMA. I'm sitting here with Andrew from ThoughtAI. My name is Kevin Murcko. I am the CEO of CoinMetro. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to jump right into it because I know we're going to get a lot of questions and I don't want to waste too much time. So I'm going to pass the mic over virtually to Andrew so he can give a quick introduction about himself, and then we're going to jump right in. So Andrew, the show is yours.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me on this AMA. That's really a great pleasure. You guys have been a super partner for us, and always great to spend some time with you and spend some time with the community. So yeah, just a quick introduction. So I'm Andrew Hacker. I am the founder of ThoughtAI. We're a unique artificial intelligence blockchain platform where everything we do is based on basically artificial intelligent agents. So these software agents actually have a little bit of logic and goal sets within them. So it allows us to really unlock the value of data and information and also monetize that through the THT platform. So we've got some exciting things coming up in 2022, which I'm definitely happy to discuss. And very much thank you for having me on this AMA. And I look forward to hearing and answering all the good questions that come from the community. So.
Amazing. Thanks, Andrew. So just a quick one from me. My name is Kevin Murcko. I'm CEO, as I said, here at CoinMetro, also the founder. Been in traditional finance for 20-something years, mainly in FX, so foreign exchange. Made this transfer over to crypto back in 2017, at least professionally, though I was mining Bitcoin in 2009 on an iMac in an office in Cabo San Lucas. So that's my personal kind of, I guess, walk through crypto started almost right from the beginning. I didn't read the white paper in the first couple of months that it came out, but I think maybe 4 or 5 months afterwards, somebody sent me the link over an SMS, not a WhatsApp, not a Telegram message, right. An SMS. It might have even been an MMS, if anybody knows what those are. It might have been actually a picture of the thing. I don't remember, or a screenshot, but yeah, it's been a while. Crypto's exciting. We all know that. So let's jump right in. I got a question to start us off, Andrew, and I think it's a decent one considering that we are today is the 30th of December. So tomorrow celebrations begin. Good thing we didn't do this tomorrow because people might be too drunk to listen. So 2021 coming to an end. Just like everybody gets the same. Every interviewer right now across any platform is asking the same question. So I'm going to ask you. 2021 is coming to an end. What are the great things you saw happen at Thought through 2021? What are some of the pitfalls you might have seen, and what are you expecting? What great things are you expecting for 2022?
Yeah, well, certainly 2021 was a great growth year for us. I mean, certainly getting listed with the CoinMetro exchange and kind of starting to establish the project and starting to get the word out there about the interesting things we're doing. I mean, certainly couldn't have done this at all without the great support of the community. We've seen lots of organic interest in the things that we're doing, the development work that we're doing. And certainly I got to give a shout out to my chief technology officer, Phil Grimm. I mean, he's been there, assisting everybody with getting, mining rigs set up and getting staking and helping everybody, get masternodes set up, which, is really, really helped for adoption with us. I mean, I think we're almost at probably about 600 masternodes right now, it's fantastic. Just having that support and having that number of people out there that are, working with the project, staking coins, and also, making masternodes available, because masternodes are kind of the key to, the technology offering that we have. I mean, it allows us to offer services, allows the masternodes to be able to process nuances essentially. And, we'll be releasing some code along those lines probably in the next month to get out there, and just to kind of give a little background on how those masternodes work. So every masternode is sort of a service provider, right? So those nodes, we call them Nuance virtual machines, are able to basically understand the capabilities of a particular hardware platform. So for example, if that hardware platform is connected to some kinds of sensors, IoT devices, things that can actually produce data, or data storage or anything like that, it makes those services available to the intelligent agents. So when those intelligent agents might land or travel to a particular masternode, they can kind of query that masternode and say, hey, I'm this Nuance, here's the types of things that I'm looking for. Do you have these services available for me? And the masternode can say, well, yes, I do. And here's how you have access to it. And, we leverage the tokenomics of the coin where every service that or capability, as we call them, that masternode has access to, the Nuance can actually unlock access to that service by paying a small fuel fee, I guess you can call it. So having all those masternodes out there gives us a lot of expansion and access to a lot of different computational platforms to allow us to process these data elements. So for us, this was an amazing year. Kind of just starting to get out there, starting to get noticed by significant partners, and growing our reach, I think, is pretty huge for us. So I'm pretty happy with how 2021 went. We're very excited to see how 2022 is going. I've been having lots of conversations. It's funny, try to take a couple days off this week and kind of just shuffling around conference calls. Still on calls all day with lots of potential partners. There's a lot of organic interest that we've been getting as we get noticed, and a lot of exciting things that we'll be announcing pretty soon. And certainly I can talk about a few of those now, or as questions come up. So happy to do that.
Perfect. Thanks for the insight. Just to clarify one thing, just that I had in my mind while you were speaking. So would you say that these agents that you talked of are similar to what oracles? Do they act similar to how an oracle acts on other protocols, like pulling information from outside of the protocol and bringing it into so that it can be disseminated or used for other purposes? Yeah,
certainly. From the Oracle perspective, each Nuance is essentially it's almost its own API. You can actually query a Nuance, and I'm sure a lot of people out in the audience are familiar with digital twins. Digital twins are sort of a digital encapsulated representation of something physical. So whether it be a sensor that's outputting data, access to markets, or anything that actually connects into data streams or things like that. That's essentially what a Nuance is. You can also think of a Nuance as sort of an enhanced smart contract. So a smart contract is sort of a data store with some logic that gets executed, and based on what that logic says, it can create some action. So every Nuance actually has this capability. Nuances can actually connect. They're aware of other Nuances. They're aware of their own identities, which is actually very interesting. They can actually exchange information, and they can almost quote unquote kind of speak to other Nuances and say, well, hey, here's my purpose, here's my goal set, here are the types of things that I'm looking to do. What kind of information do you have? And can I share some of that information? And they can exchange information. You can almost kind of think of them as sort of digital life on some level, right? Sort of how, if you think about cells in the body, right? They communicate with each other, through chemicals. They send chemicals to each other. They can exchange, bits of sort of this digital DNA. So yeah, they're very much like oracles. In fact, we create Nuances that represent APIs of data streams, and that allows all of that information to interact that way directly.
Cool. So just before we get going, because I'm actually seeing a lot of questions pop up, but a lot of them have they're very similar in nature. So before we go, I got one extra question, then we're going to jump into everybody else's questions. I would say, can you give us, and I'm sure you've probably given this a million times, so I know when I give these type of things, they're always slightly different, but that's just my style. But
yeah,
quick elevator pitch for people that don't understand so much about the underlying tech, but really just want to understand what ThoughtAI is, what you guys are trying to do, and what does the platform do? But again, in kind of, that's like 7th grade, New York Times editorial style delivery.
Right. Yeah. So ThoughtAI is essentially a platform that allows complex adaptive systems to live, execute, and basically thrive. And essentially, if you want to think of them as kind of crawling through information space. So we've got this interesting analogy of how big data analytics works. Essentially, you've got huge amounts of data stores, and you use external applications to sort of index, to kind of crawl through data, essentially looking for value in that data, right? So value could be, anything from some kind of correlation, some kind of connection, some kind of insight in that data. And that's, sort of the high level goal of big data analytics. They're essentially looking for so-called needles in the haystack, right? So there's this needle that has some extreme value for somebody or something or some business, along the lines of their business goals. And in the old world, there was always this separation between the applications that are accessing the data and the data itself. So the thing that we're doing that's different is we're actually kind of combining the two together. So we're combining these big data sets, with the application logic, sort of like shuffling a deck of cards, right? And combining them into these sort of universal agents. And the interesting thing about it is, instead of having an external application sort of sift and crawl through all this data looking for that needle, a Nuance can actually be the needle, right? And it's aware of the fact that it is a needle, and it says, well, hey, I think you're looking for this needle. Well, I in fact am the needle, and here it is. And you can use it however you want. So it's kind of a kind of turn things upside down, sort of a bottom-up approach where all this information can constantly be processed, constantly interact with each other, building value as it goes along. And certainly, value in the information space and the digital space is somewhat subjective, right? I mean, how do you, really say what is the value of a particular piece of data, right? I mean, in the end, data is just numbers, right? Numbers, letters, words, but it's the context of how that information is used that provides and derives that value, right? So, for example, if we've got huge amounts of data sets that are, health related information, maybe it's genetic, maybe it's, types of drugs or medications that someone's using. But in there is some one little piece of information that might say, well, hey, this could potentially be the cure for cancer. So, how do you put a value on something like that, right? I mean, certainly our personal health information, has value. I think if you go on the black market, right, credit cards have maybe $5 for credit card record. Personal health information might have a value of $1,000 to someone who's trying to steal it and sell it. But essentially, how do you put a value on something that's unlocking some big thing or solving some big problem, right? I mean, it really depends on what the value of that problem being solved is. If we think about climate change, or maybe there's some particular way at looking at some information that reduces carbon output, let's say, or increases the efficiency in supply chain. So I mean, all of those particular use cases, they've all got value to somebody, right? And how do you actually tie some value to what that connection is? And that's exactly what we are seeking to do with this platform, is basically creating marketplaces for different types of data. I mean, you might have huge amounts of so-called low-level data where that data is worth maybe, and I'm just kind of throwing numbers out there, maybe it's 5 cents per gigabyte, right? But once that data is processed, it's transformed, there's connections made, there's insight, there's value kind of created out of there. Maybe that information is valued at $1 or $2 per,
So that's where the nuances come in, that they're actually finding the valuable data inside of a data set.
Right. And a nuance can represent a connection, right? So a nuance can represent, an indexing of, gigabytes of different pieces of data. And it actually, it keeps track of, all of these connections. And, we can use computational formulas to actually, assign various values to these data sets, right? And certainly THT has a big part to play in that. The value of THT and nuances can actually, hold certain amounts of that cryptocurrency within each nuance, right? And that's kind of, the real interesting stuff. So yeah, that's kind of the basics there.
Very cool. Well, on a lighter note, when Lambo. So we'll skip right over that one, but we had to start there because it is crypto. Everybody's got to ask when Lambo. So there was a few questions about use cases, but since we've already discussed that a bit, maybe down the line we can take a use case known to everyone. Maybe we could talk about what ThoughtAI could do for a company like CoinMetro, but we'll take that up in a bit. Sure. Let's get to a few other types of questions. So from Stephen, we have, what is THT's TPS count, transactions per second? More specifically, how is it able to scale? And I guess I think we're talking about, I would assume he doesn't necessarily mean THT's TPS count, because THT is a token sitting on, Anyway, have at it, Andrew.
Right, sure. Well, as far as transactions per second, I mean, certainly, the blockchain, we've got a max block size of about 4 megabytes. So, we've certainly got the capacity within each block. The interesting thing is, we have to consider both on-chain transactions per second and also off-chain. because of the fact that they're linked. So, we can do a lot more processing off chain, and that's exactly how we scale. Being able to kind of lock up coins, and, produce all kinds of transactions that happen off chain, sort of the whole idea of Lightning Network, where you're kind of, creating, point to point connections and tunnels. We do the same thing where essentially, I mean, if we even think about what is a transaction. So in the ThoughtAI world, a transaction is not just a transfer of THT from one wallet to another. It's also the interaction of every piece of data, every piece of information that's off chain. So if we've got a big data pool of nuances that are, connecting, kind of interacting with every other nuance, that actually also counts as a transaction. So these transactions, they happen off chain, and then periodically they get settled on chain. So, as far as expansion and growth, and scalability, I mean, really sky's the limit. I mean, all of these nuances, if you think of, hundreds and millions of nuances that are actually interacting with each other, each time one of those nuances, either travels from one node to another one, samples a data set from a particular sensor or something like that, each one of those is actually transactions. So, and to put a number on it, I'm not sure exactly, what our maximum TPS would be just based on the blocks on the chain. But, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, even millions of transactions per second, once we're, fully up to scale.
So to summarize, basically the fact that you can actually do off-chain versus fully on-chain transactions means that your scalability obviously isn't just limited by the technology that sits on-chain.
Correct.
Cool. Let's see. This is from Redod 2K. Sorry, I like to butcher names. Anybody who's watched AMAs with me before knows I'm terrible at reading names. So if I butcher it, it wasn't personal. Any overview of the tokenomics and the supply release? Thanks for the AMA.
Hey, you're certainly welcome. Yeah, as far as tokenomics, I think we're at probably about 309 million circulating THT right now. At last check, I think we had about 40 million THT locked up on CoinMetro's staking platform there. And I think globally, we're probably a little bit north of 200 million locked up in masternodes. And we have an additional 500 million coins that are actually locked up both in partnerships and also for use for nuances. So nuances can actually check out coins. Essentially, they kind of go into our reserve, they check out THT, and then they can kind of, go about on their merry way, searching around on the internet for value. And once they find that value, they can kind of, come back and release those coins back into the reserve. So, currently we've got, a significant amount locked up, and, as we get more and more coins that are staked, we will consider, releasing additional coins into the market in a controlled way. I mean, certainly, price support is important. We want to, keep with that, nice, slow, steady growth. Certainly, we don't want to, spike out and kind of, pump and dump at all. I mean, we really want to, have that organic growth, and have, fully supportable long-term, growth in the price. So.
Cool, absolutely. Thanks for the answer on that one, Andrew. Let me see, what do we got next? We have, so this has been discussed a bit, but since there's a bit more technical question hidden in this one, I'm gonna read this one to you. So can you share some technical details about how and why do companies use THT, which we've covered? I mean, if you want to throw another example, have at it, and the blockchain. What is it that THT does that wouldn't be possible with standard RDBMS or NoSQL storage systems?
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic question. So I've had some discussions with another colleague of mine, and he actually pointed out that nuances are actually sort of like little databases that run around, right? Because of the fact that they hold data. And certainly you can query a nuance and ask it questions. And that's actually one of the interesting use cases that we've talked about in healthcare, for example. You've got protected health information, we encrypt it, we secure it. I mean, you can almost kind of think of a nuance as sort of an onion with various layers, right? So the inside layer contains the actual data, but we might want to keep some additional information about that data on sort of an outer layer, right? So, essentially a nuance is, from the standpoint of querying data, getting information back about that data, you can almost think of nuances, as individual little databases. So, that's exactly how we're with some of our partners, sort of graph databases that contain nuances, and you can actually query those nuances and ask information. So, let's say, for example, one nuance might hold a social security number for a particular person, right? So you can query that nuance, and maybe you don't want the actual social security number itself, but you might ask some questions about that social security number. Like, for example, what is the location where this was created? What are some of the other data stores that this social security number is tied to or connected to, right? And then the nuance can actually, query the data itself and basically answer that question without actually revealing the information that's inside. So it's a little bit of a different paradigm in the way that you think about it, but that's essentially what we're doing, is sort of ingesting all of this data, all this information, encapsulating it in nuances, sort of tagging each one of those nuances with information, about that data. What type of data is it? Is it healthcare information? Is it supply chain information? Is it product information? All those kinds of things. Who is the owner? What is the provenance of this data? Right. So there's all kinds of traceability elements that come into play. Who has access to it? Who has access to it? Nuances can actually hold their history of all interactions within it, so they sort of have their own memory, right? So yeah.
What about in terms of the marketplace and nuances? If I were to have, let's say, a nuance that I controlled, would I be able to market that nuance then on the marketplace, and then thus monetize that data that I've kind of disseminated and for any specific industry, for example?
Yeah. That's actually a super use case. Certainly. Certainly something that we are working on is actually creating a marketplace for individual groups of nuances, even to the point where if a nuance represents something like an artificial intelligence algorithm, it could represent, a certain machine learning model, or, a group of nuances that are interconnected. We expect to fully be able to publish that nuance and actually create a marketplace for it, so people could buy and sell that machine learning model, right? So if you think of something like maybe in the—
What about like if this then, I mean, this is very simplistic, but something like if this then that. So there's a lot of companies online that have these services, if I get a Gmail, send me an SMS, if I get this, if I get that. And it's actually those companies, I don't know if you can monetize those yourself, but obviously they monetize those different, mini tasks inside of their ecosystems.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that the if this then that analogy is actually a really great one, because that's exactly what nuances are structured to do. They basically take the information, take the data. They have certain pieces of logic in there that if certain conditions happen, this nuance can say move over to this location, or connect with this device, or create some other kind of action logic. So that's exactly how this would work. But yeah, being able to publish those nuances. I mean, if you think right now about smart contracts and NFTs, I mean, people are actually creating marketplaces for NFTs, and you can think of nuances as sort of active NFTs. And I know there's some other companies that are looking at tying NFTs to actual artificial intelligence bots, right? Yeah. So certain personalities, certain characteristics, and think of all this talk about the metaverse and personalities that NFTs could possibly represent. I mean, that's sort of exactly where we're going with this. If you can buy and sell a non-player character that has some intelligence to it, I mean, that's where things really start to get interesting. So we're talking with a few partners about building exactly that. So very interesting.
So obviously, even if there were no, let's say, a face value differences between standard databases and, let's say, what Thought is doing, the monetization and the tokenization of a database is still something I think that's a major use case, because once you're able to monetize, well, big companies that monetize data that's what Facebook is, right? They monetize data. I mean, that's all they do. That's what Google does.
Right,
that's what
right.
All these companies make billions and billions and billions of monetizing data, but we get left in the cold. We give them our data, or sometimes in many cases, we research the data. We make a nuance, basically. We give it to Google. Google sells it, makes money. We get nothing.
Right.
And so yeah, I think just that alone not only is it a major use case or a major difference, it's a major use case for THT as well, as being the token that powers the ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, certainly there's so much information out there. There's so much data sprawl. Data's in so many different locations. And, if you talk to, any large company that depends on data, I mean, they'll tell you that, they barely scratch the surface of realizing the value that's in their data. I mean, if they're lucky, if they use 1 or 2 or 5%, the rest of it kind of gets lost and, left on the cutting room floor, so to speak. So, being able to kind of increase that number of valuable information, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20%. I mean, certainly, the market is there for data. I mean, so-called data brokers, I mean, they're buying and selling information all over the place. And you really did hit the nail on the head there with, how Facebook and Google kind of see the world. I mean, they are constantly vacuuming up all this information, and, every little bit of insight that Facebook's able to glean out of, everything you do on their platform. I mean, they're making huge amounts of money on that. And certainly being able to give that ability back to the people that are actually creating the data, giving that control back to the users, I think, that's a big piece. And certainly, data sovereignty is another area that's very interesting that we're looking at. What if, you could create a Nuance and link that to all of the personal information that you have, both on your computer, in your emails, in your text, on your Facebook platform, and you can kind of control who has access to it. And even when someone does have access to it, maybe there's sort of a microcharge there, right?
So people pay you to advertise to you. So you like electronics, so you give your data to Best Buy, for example, or something along those lines, anonymized data, obviously. But then they can advertise back to you, but they pay for the service.
Right.
So they pay to advertise back to the consumer.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's getting so kind of intense now with the way Facebook and all these companies do everything. I mean, you can speak to your phone, and then 2 seconds later, you'll see an ad for the exact same thing that you were talking about, right? Yeah. So, as far as privacy is concerned, I mean, that's another interesting area. It's, we don't have control now, right? I mean, it's, if you think about Alexa, it's sort of brute force for all of the users.
You said Alexa, and I saw a blue light blink on the corner of my eye. So please be careful with what you may say here.
Yeah, I was just reading an article that said that Alexa, for the first time, basically, I think something happened. It told a child to take a penny and stick it into an outlet as a suggestion, and it's it's kind of funny. And that's another huge area too. Is artificial intelligence is getting so sophisticated and so complex that a lot of times even the people that are creating these algorithms don't necessarily understand everything and all the layers that happen and how they work. So if they come out with some kind of bizarre answer to a question, the engineers they're still kind of scratching their head and looking at it and going, well, how did it come up with this, right? So it's sort of we're at the point where the power and the strength of these AI algorithms is getting so strong, and really as humans we have to kind of keep up, which is exactly why there's a need for a platform like Thought, because of the fact that all of our algorithms essentially kind of communicate back what they're doing and how they do it, which is the important piece, right? So exactly. If a bunch of data is actually interacting, we keep track of that, and sort of have Nuances report back and say, well, here's what I've been doing for the last hour or 2 hours, right? I've been interacting here, I've been creating value here, and sort of keep track of things that way. So it's we call this sort of traceable AI, right? Because a Nuance is actually aware of all the different places that it's been, all of the connections that it's made, and can report that back. So that's another interesting thing.
I took a mental note when you said falling on the cutting room floor, and I just made me think of, for some reason, hair at a barbershop or at a salon, right? They cut the hair off, which to you is useless. You came to get a haircut because you have too much hair. And then someone sells that, to make hair extensions, which obviously I don't buy. But,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't. Me and Andrew aren't buying hair extensions. We probably should. I'm not sure where we'd clip them to, but anyway. But that goes to show you that data took us, I don't know how many decades to figure out that data had value to the extent that we now know it has value. But even things like just discarded hair has value, right? So it's amazing that it took us this long to figure out that our personal data had a value, when we've been selling our discarded hair and literally discarded skin. Some places actually make products out of discarded skin,
right?
For I don't know how many decades. It's amazing.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Fight Club.
Yeah, the soap.
Making soap, yeah. Right? No, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, data is considered the new oil. you know,
Yeah.
there's so
I heard
much.
that in Dubai maybe 1,000 times when I was there.
Oh
so.
yeah, sure. Yeah, and they're actually pretty serious about it. I was actually over in UAE a couple months ago, and you know, making some really good connections over there. And they're you know, heavily into crypto. I mean, they realize that you know, the current hydrocarbon oil market is, you know, kind of on the downswing, and they're definitely looking to sort of, you know, invest
The next 100 years of their empire. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and even if you've ever been to Dubai, I mean, you know, every time I go there, they've erected another, you know, 10, you know, super skyscrapers. It's actually quite phenomenal. And you know, another area that we're doing a lot of work in, and pretty soon going to be announcing some partnerships is in energy. We're actually working with a guy by the name of John Mankins. He literally wrote the book on a technology called space-based solar power. We're about to ink a partnership with him, and he's, you know, looking to basically launch satellite arrays that go up into geosynchronous orbit, and they can actually convert solar energy directly to microwaves and beam that to Earth, right? And what this does is it dramatically reduces the price of electricity. So a lot of the miners out there that are struggling with mining costs, you know, if we can get, you know, really cheap solar energy, energy that's, you know, not stopped by clouds, not stopped by night and day. It's basically 95% efficient, and it's also directable, so it can actually be sort of, you know, focused into receivers on Earth, and can really help with you know, connecting the supply to the demand. So there's a great need for artificial intelligence like technologies in the space economy. We're also partnering with another company called Spacecom Global that's looking to basically monetize all kinds of satellite imagery for all kinds of things like, you know, deforestation, you know, water changes, all kinds of interesting stuff. So we'll be announcing those partnerships pretty soon.
Pretty cool. Sounds like 2022 is off to a great start. So how, just to ask you, how much time do you have? Should we keep going? You have some?
Sure. Yeah. Let's keep going as long as we got questions coming in. Let's
Okay, here we go. We have a few, I think, that'll take a few minutes to answer. Then there's a few short ones, so we can probably riddle through those pretty fast.
Okay.
So Peter coming in with a decent question here. AI is really exciting, has lots of potential for good and bad outcomes. I think all tech has potential for both, that's for sure. Is the THT team thinking about and investing resources into AI safety alignment? If so, what steps are you taking? So yeah, how to make sure that the platform isn't used for the wrong reasons, I guess.
Right. Well, yeah. So, and that's certainly where the blockchain comes in. You know, one of the things that we're doing is we're actually working on publishing the actual AI models themselves right out into the blockchain. So we can actually say, you know, we're taking this data stream and this data stream, we're transforming it this way, and here's the expected output that we intend to get. And by the very fact that we're actually publishing that information out there, you know, all the nodes can kind of agree, yes, you know, we think this is a good way to do things. And then, you know, once it's all agreed upon, then, you know, we can, you know, go about creating nuances to go out and actually enact those algorithms. Not only that, but, you know, as the algorithms continue to process and interact, they can actually report their state periodically back to the blockchain and say, okay, yes, all of these nuances are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. You know, maybe in the case that we might have some rogue intelligent agents, you know, we can actually say, oh, well, look, you know, that nuance isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. So, you know, send it a kill signal, right? And, you know, switch itself off. So, you know, that's exactly the type of things. I mean, I think it's all about transparency. You know, as long as we're publishing, you know, exactly the steps and the transformations that we expect things to do and how we expect them to happen, and we can kind of keep tabs on it over time, right? So periodically, as all these nuances kind of check in and say, you know, here's what I did today, right? I interacted with this sensor. I went and I, you know, created this connection. And, you know, so kind of how am I doing, right? And, you know, if there's any course correction or any adjustments that need to be made, you know, we can do that sort of on a step-by-step basis.
Cool. Nice, complete answer to a great question. Thanks, Peter, for the question. Got another good question here from Parika. He had another question earlier in the show. So as understood, THT is an infrastructure for other companies that can build on. What kind of SDK API languages do you support? Great question.
Yeah. So yeah, that is a really good question. So yeah, we're working on releasing an SDK, and even to the point where, we've sort of got a more visual interface where, people can actually assemble different data streams, different machine learning models, and physically map them all out in sort of a graphical user interface. And as far as the API itself, I mean, Nuance has run any kind of scripting language. Initially, we're kind of working with JavaScript, certainly Ruby and Python, or a couple other languages. The key is that as those scripting languages execute, that they're actually reporting their execution back to the blockchain. This is our proof of evolution. How nuances evolve, what they do, do they create clones of themselves? Do they create a couple daughter nuances, and specifically kind of tracking how these scripting languages are kind of evolving over time. So yeah, I mean, certainly any company that we can create machine learning models for, we can actually run on the Thought platform.
Very good. Another great question from Parika. Awesome. So here's a simple question, might not the most simple answer, but I guess there's a few things you can do. But here we go. How can we use or utilize our THT tokens? They are actually coins. I guess they're right in that sense. They're coins.
Yep, they're coins, not tokens. But yeah, so essentially you can use THT to actually stake a nuance, and this is kind of an interesting concept. So much in the same way that we can stake a master node, right? We can lock up certain amounts of THT to run a node. You can also stake a nuance, right? So maybe, for example, 100 THT coins can go and stake a nuance. So that nuance actually represents that 100 THT coins, and once it does that, it sort of has fuel to be able to kind of move throughout the network, to interact, to create value. Even to the point where that value increases, right? So we fully expect to be releasing quite shortly an interface where people can actually create models, back those models with THT coins, right? And kind of grant those coins to the models themselves. And as they continue to compute and interact, certainly the value of those coins that are held by that nuance can basically fluctuate and go up and down. And that's essentially where we're creating the marketplace there. So as the value of the data goes up, we expect the value of the coins that are staked in that particular pattern, I guess if you want to call it, it should go up as more value is uncovered.
Absolutely. Valuable data, more valuable token that's used to actually access the data. Makes sense.
Yep.
That falls into another question we had earlier about tokenomics. So, Mr. Spam could be Mrs. Spam or Miss Spam. I'm assuming it's Mr. I don't know why. Will THT have a smart contract and NFT type of well, I guess this would be tokens then if THT creates other assets on their own chain. However, we did touch on this a little bit, but maybe you just want to recap in case somebody's
sure. Yeah. Essentially, a nuance is effectively a smart contract, and it's more complex than that, in that it has the ability to actually run machine learning models. So we kind of think of it as an active smart contract, and even in the NFT space, NFTs are essentially unique smart contracts that can be tied to bits and pieces of information. It's kind of interesting how people can actually purchase an NFT of a piece of art, and then they can look at that piece of art on their computer, but that NFT doesn't really necessarily do anything other than buying and selling it. So what we're looking at is actually creating active NFTs. So these are NFTs that can actually travel from device to device. Maybe if you start thinking about all this metaverse type stuff, if you can have a nuance that can understand that it's connected with a device that has a display, right? You can have that NFT actually display something on a banner or a large screen. If you think of Times Square and interconnectivity with advertising, sports events, all kinds of things like that. And we definitely got some rather large companies, some music production companies that are interested in this kind of thing. Sort of an NFT that can interact, right? If you think about how Pokemon Go works, right? Augmented reality, you can kind of see, smart animals or, different types of things that are overlaid, on your view. I mean, that's, exactly the same type of thing that we're going for with that. So that's a great question. Oh, I lost your audio there.
You didn't lose it. I
yeah.
turned it off. You know, we all get one mistake like that throughout the show. So there's mine. Can't repeat. What I was saying was that you actually partially answered this one, but I think we can actually go a bit more in depth on what we talked about at the beginning of the show, was how potentially a CoinMetro kind of partnership with THG could flourish even further by using some of these other technologies. Someone asking what other opportunities we could see in the future between THG and CoinMetro, for example, AI trading with data from CoinMetro. I just thought while you were saying the other answer, now this doesn't necessarily have to do necessarily with providing services to clients, but I would imagine a Nuance that would be able to have some information or some guidance to find specific pockets of clients, let's say maybe through Google search or through, you know, Twitter advertising or whatever, trying to look for keywords or looking for maybe groups on these different social media platforms. And then by way of something like I'm going to call it a non-passive, non-fungible token, because, you know, active would be too easy. If they're non-fungible, right, they should be non-passive. So an NP NFT, yeah, to actually send out an advertisement specifically correlated to whatever that Nuance is sending back in terms of information. So that's one thing that sprung into my mind when you're talking about billboards. But maybe you have some additional ideas.
Right. Yeah, we're actually very interested in the trading aspect of Nuances, and we're actually creating an interface right now that creates a bunch of agents, and each agent can have its own strategy. So a strategy might be, you know, look for a drop in this market price of 5%. You know, looking at, you know, moving averages and things like that, but looking for certain patterns. And then when sort of that pattern gets recognized, the Nuance can actually set a trade. And that, you know, that's something that we've been sort of conceiving of and thinking about for a long time, is, you know, having a bunch of these agents, you know, call them what you like, you know, active NFTs, you know, active intelligent agents, but each agent, you know, sort of has its own rule set. And, you know, its own sort of pattern recognition, where, you know, if it sees a certain pattern, you know, maybe we're trading Bitcoin and, you know, we see, you know, the price drop, you know, 10% below the moving average, it can, you know, actually execute a trade, you know, based on, you know, sort of the accounting, its own internal accounting that it has. But not only that, but, you know, this agent can actually move, you know, in between markets, you know, whether it's an arbitrage agent. I mean, you know, the whole idea of having actually a bunch of agents swarm around a certain pattern, right? If we might see some kind of spike in price, and an agent recognizes that spike, it can actually kind of quote unquote go and tell its friends and say, you know, hey, I'm seeing this pattern over here. You know, why don't you guys all jump in here, and, you know, take advantage of this price swing. So yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of different areas where, you know, we can leverage these agents, you know, do smarter trading and, you know, kind of, you know, evaluate all the information. I know you guys are collecting tons of information about, you know, price movements and trading activity and all those types of things. So I mean, that's definitely something we'd love to talk a little bit more about in the future.
Absolutely. We used to build trading bots, I guess, if you want to call them that, in the FX market as well. So definitely a lot of things we can probably chat about in terms of creating strategies based on well-known indicators. And when I say indicators, I don't necessarily mean lines on a chart, but just general indicators or data that can be pulled from other places. You know, we have this, for instance, this Twitter sentiment indicator that sits on the website, which is one thing that, I mean, 5-6 years ago was quite nuanced. People thought trading off of Twitter, how weird is that? But they actually do that in major US stock markets, are traded based on social media sentiment. So I think there's a lot of cool things we could do there. All this talk agents, I reminded myself I need to watch the new Matrix movie. I heard it's kind of a disappointment, but
yeah,
just reminded me that I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, we did watch it. It's actually, it is very, very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of interesting concepts in that movie. One of them is that software agents actually have real world representations. They actually show the new Morpheus in the movie, right? He actually shows up in Zion as a swarm of like metallic particles. So they're kind of definitely bridging this gap between, you know, software and intelligent AI is actually representing themselves in the physical
world. Like people's avatars, basically.
Right, avatars. So, yeah.
You know, you're a 400-pound man sitting in your mom's basement, and your avatar is like a 12-year-old girl in a bikini. Yeah, that's
right.
Basically. Yeah. Beware, kids, beware of the internet. Just saying.
Yeah, no doubt.
Beware the internet. From Hot Sizzle, this must be Snoop Dogg's younger cousin or something. Love that THT helps small farmers. As a small farmer, is there an example of how I can utilize ThoughtAI tech?
Yeah, so we're actually probably about a month away from releasing a grains marketplace out of Nigeria, and that's exactly what we're looking to do. Is basically connect small farmers with large buyers, and maybe some of you have seen the announcements we put out about partnerships with Guinness Nigeria and also another company called Promasador, and another company called Olam, which is a subsidiary of Mitsubishi. And those are actually large grain purchasers, and we're leveraging our platform to be able to connect small farmers, groups of small farmers, to be able to leverage their output and their production and be able to negotiate acceptable prices with these large purchasers. So, that's exactly the type of thing we're doing. We're using our AI to, look at things like, soil conditions, water quality, all kinds of interesting information that would, help agribusiness. So, yep, we're definitely doing that right now.
Very good. So how would that also translate to small farmers? Like, would they be able to kind of utilize some of this tech to their own benefit? Or are we talking, at least right now, more about kind of macro setups or larger setups?
So there's certainly some macro components to it, and certainly small farmers and underserved areas, there is definitely a challenge with access to technology. And that's, definitely sort of the bridge, the gap that we're trying to bridge there is giving those smaller farmers access to, a lot of the things that they don't have, technology being one of them. Microfinancing is certainly another one, access to that capital that they need to buy input, to buy fertilizer and things like that. So Zowacell, the company that we're partnering with, has actually created what they call crop test centers. And these are, centers that are in various regions where small farmers can go sort of aggregate, all of their produce, get access to the technology, get access to, those sort of those good data level technologies that can help them, make better agricultural and farming decisions. Yeah, I mean, certainly there is a direct benefit there. And there is sort of a, kind of a group dynamic to that where, farmers, I don't want to call it collective bargaining, but, they can actually leverage all of their produce to get better prices as they go and make contracts with these large buyers.
Cool. Amazing. Moving on. Well, this, I definitely got to post this. This is not a question, but we both have massive foreheads apparently, which is bullish. So welcome to the Forehead Club, Andrew. I'll need to get you a t-shirt. I do have a forehead t-shirt, so we'll have to get a dual Andrew Kevin forehead t-shirt. If that doesn't make price go somewhere, I don't know what will. That's for sure.
Right.
Okay, let's see. We're going to skip over this one. Sorry about that. Again, trying to find. Don't pay attention to that question. So this one's a decent question. Lots of different directions and ideas in development. Is there a roadmap somewhere that we can take a gander at?
Yeah, so we are definitely updating our roadmap for 2022. We'll be releasing that probably within the next month or so. Certainly we've accomplished a lot of the things that we wanted to in 2021, but as far as, big software development pushes and enhanced partnerships, that roadmap's continually updated. It's certainly a work in progress. We're definitely a small, hungry team, and everybody's spread very thin, but the more and more we get out there and more connections we make, we're also looking for additional funding. We're actually going to be doing sort of a joint raise with Spacecom Global. They've got access to a lot of interested parties to kind of help fund a lot of the projects and contracts that group has access to. We're working with a director at the European Space Agency, and he's got a lot of government contracts that are looking for artificial intelligence solutions. So we'll be capitalizing on that and just creating more and more value as we go. So we'll be releasing an updated roadmap probably over the next month or so.
I have a meme in the back of me on the meme wall in the office. Not right now, but in my office in Estonia, and it says it's a Back to the Future meme, and it says, "Where we're going, we don't need roadmaps."
Don't need roadmaps. Exactly.
Just wanted to, on the last question you answered, I totally forgot to make this point made, but you were talking about kind of access, right? For small farmers, trying to bridge that gap, make sure that they have access to the same data and thus the same opportunities as large scale and macro enterprises. And that's one of the reasons, that's definitely one of the top reasons why after our first call, we decided to list THT on the exchange, because that is a goal that we have set for ourselves in terms of finance in general. I think that one of the big innovations probably the biggest innovation that blockchain has brought us is access, whether that be access to information, access to data, access to monetization, access to financial markets, whatever. It breaks down the barrier that normally exists for many, many people around the world to have access. Regulation can still be a pitfall here and there, but that, we got to collectively work on over time. But definitely, it enables access. So I just wanted to make mention of that, because lots of people ask, when we list things, why? And a lot of times I give a blanket answer, which is still true, but we kind of, the ethos matched. We like what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. They have experience, whatever. But this is definitely a point that I just wanted to make mention, because a lot of people do ask, and that's definitely one of the reasons why we decided to work together with you guys. Was that we shared that vision, that goal.
Yep, glad you did.
Okay, so this is a unique one. We have about 4 questions more. I think we're going to make it right to the top of the hour, so we'll see. Hey, Stephen, I like that THT shares core ideas with Harold Bloom. Is his idea of interconnectedness what most appealed to you?
Yeah. So Howard Bloom, he's a great guy. He's written, quite a few books. Essentially, they're about complex adaptive systems. I mean, that's where all the focus of his work is. And just a little quick background on him. I mean, he's very well known in the music industry. He was a publicist for some of the largest bands to come out of the 70s and 80s. Prince, Queen, Kiss, Hall & Oates, John Cougar Mellencamp, just to name a few. And then, as he kind of got older, he started writing books about complex adaptive systems, how very small things, when they work together on large scales, can create very, very large things. The whole idea of emergent properties, right? So an emergent property could be, anything of value. It could be literally human consciousness, right? Human consciousness does kind of, evolve out of all of the neurons in your brain interacting. And all arguments aside about is consciousness sort of this quantum state or different planes. Howard Bloom has written a bunch of books about how groups of bacteria do all kinds of interesting things. Even how termites can bring they can actually build these large, almost skyscrapers of dirt, basically, right? Because one termite says, well, here's a piece of dirt, I'm going to go put it on the highest thing that I can find, right? And then when you get a whole bunch of them doing that, they create almost these cities, out of, the areas that they're mining, much the same way that, ants work collectively together, or bees search for pollen and food, right? They do that because one bee finds, a pollen source and then goes back to the hive and basically communicates that. They literally do a dance that shows the direction, shows the distance, right? And all the other bees that, focus their attention on the scout bee, so to say. Once they get that, they can go out, and they're very effective and very efficient at doing those types of things. So Howard's written a book called The Global Brain, which is when I first kind of discovered Howard. And the book is incredibly amazing. It talks about everything from how the universe works, how small particles kind of, danced and connected and, turned into atoms and then elements and, all of these complex interactive things. And as I read that book, I couldn't help but think how much what he was describing in his books was actually similar to what we're building with ThoughtAI. And I reached out to him. I said, hey, I think we're building what you're talking about in these books. And he said, oh, well, that's great. And I've been involved with the Howard Bloom Institute, where he's setting up a nonprofit to essentially hold all of his works. And we've got some really interesting people on the advisory board at Howard Bloom Institute. One of them is Jeff Bridges. I'm sure you guys might have seen that. The dude, he's part of that. Harry Hamlin's another interesting guy who's got a company called TAE, and they're working with plasma fusion. He's a big investor there. And he's part of the advisory group. So There's lots of interesting, connections there. And we're essentially, trying to build this global brain, right? So, using all of these small intelligent agents that as they interact, they create these emergent properties, and the emerging properties is exactly what we're interested in. And that's the quote, small things working together to make great big things.
Yeah, the ant analogy is amazing. I had an ant farm as a kid, and it used to mesmerize me how, obviously without hearing them talk to each other, I'm sure they have their language, right? But all you see is antennas touch each other, and then all of a sudden, they're all doing the same thing. And I always thought as a kid, why can't we do this? We're supposed to be, so much more intelligent than these animals or insects. Well, we are horrible as a race, as a human race, entirely about, kind of doing these complex but seemingly simple things, which is follow the leader. Well, we're very good at that, actually, but yeah, we tend to combine telephone with follow the leader. So we don't actually follow the leader. We follow our interpretation of what the leader's doing.
Right.
Very cool. All right, we have two quick questions. I think they need about a minute each, and we're going to run right up on top of the hour, so it's good timing. How big is your development team? This is from Sale Lizard. So if anybody wants to buy a lizard, you know where to go. And are you growing your team?
Oh, yeah, great question. So our core development team is about 10 co-founders. Phil is obviously one of them. Matthew Hikes is our chief architect. Sam Jones is our VP of engineering. We've got a team of about 6 US-based developers that are, helping us continue to build out and crank out code. We've got a couple developers in Nigeria. We've got some in Nepal. We've got developers in Spain, Costa Rica, South America, working on some individual projects. I think probably all said and done, our team's about 30. And we will be aggressively scaling up that team size in 2022. Certainly as we get additional funding in, we're able to hire additional developers, and certainly working with the community. I know we've got some of our community members that are interested in, helping us, build out certain solutions like, pooled mining. I know is a big one that a lot of folks have been asking for. So, we're definitely going to, kind of get that all up and running. Basically everything we can do to kind of support the technology and support the community. But yeah, we've got a really strong group of developers. It's organic growth at this point. People are very interested in the technology that we're building, and they always ask, what can I do? How can I help? So, connecting with those folks, having them be part of the team is, definitely very important to us.
It's amazing when you see that, right? When your own community wants to actually help out and doesn't even ask for anything in return. It's one of the things that brought me into crypto. I couldn't really believe it coming from the finance world, where nobody does anything, never mind from their heart, but definitely not for free. Right. So that's always amazing to see. And I'm glad to see that Thought's saying the same thing. Two things to note there. One, fundraising, we can definitely help with that as well. You can always run a dual campaign on CoinMetro's Invest platform. I'm sure a lot of the guys holding THT on the platform that bought it, in the beginning, would be happy to throw some cash towards Thought's way. So we could talk about that as well. And there was a second thing, but I'm getting too old and too bald, so I forgot what it was. Hopefully I'll remember before the end of the show, which is only a few minutes away. So 2 minutes away, I think. So let's see. I'm going to take the last question. There's 2 or 3 to pick from here. This one's interesting. It does talk a little bit about another entity, but I think so. VXV creates data sets. This is a question, and THT makes them travel. So maybe we can end with this one. What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a super question. Yeah. So I mean, that's sort of exactly the way to think about this. Data sets that are mobile and, nuances that encapsulate data, they do have their own internal routing logic. And that's actually, a big foundational piece of how these work, is where, Nuance can basically travel from node to node based on logic that's contained within it. And that's, definitely the unique piece, is that the Nuance contains its own internal logic that can change, can evolve over time. So if a Nuance hits, a particular node, and maybe that node doesn't have exactly the set of services that Nuance is looking for, it queries the node and says, hey, I'm looking for A, B, C, and D. The node might respond and say, well, I've got A, but I don't have B or C. But the node can actually respond and say, well, but yeah, I'm aware of this node that's over here, and here's its address, and here's its location. That node has the information that you're looking for. And then Nuance will say, okay, well, thank you very much, and then can travel over to that other node to basically fulfill its goal set. So that's exactly the way to think of it. And certainly that's another thing that I really want to see, and that we're currently developing now, is the ability to kind of track and visualize how nuances travel in real time. I don't know if any of you have seen, there was a great map that someone put together, I forget who it was, about the Lightning Network, right, for all the Bitcoin nodes. And it almost looks like, a couple things, a map of the universe, right, but also a map of how neurons in the brain are interconnected. And you can see all of the the tunnels that happen on Lightning Network. It's a very complex map, but it's got a certain overall structure to it. And certainly, if we release a visual graphical page like this that can actually show nuances traveling from node to node, I mean, that would be very interesting. And I think it would probably wind up looking like a lot of these models. So expect to see that in Q1, Q2, 2022.
Yeah, definitely everything we do follows kind of nature in one way, shape, or form. So it makes a lot of sense that brain synapse models are going to look like a lot of networks we create, whether that be the internet as well, right? The way the internet works is going to look a lot like a synapses map, because you have different connection points that always end up basically going in a cyclical manner around the world. So
right.
Pretty cool. I remember the other thing I was going to mention. So I'm not that old or bald. Well, I'm definitely bald, but I'm not that old yet. But pooled mining, definitely something we want to talk about as well, because we'd love to offer that out to our client base. We get a lot of queries about that too. So definitely, if there's something we can assist in while you guys are going down that path, definitely we're ready, willing, and able to do so. So I think we're going to end it there. We're an hour, 1 minute, and 30 seconds in. So we gave you guys an extra 90 seconds of our time today, which I think is well worth it. We got through maybe not all the questions. I did skip a few, but I think we got through all the themes and all the questions related to those themes. So I'm going to thank Andrew for being here. I'll give you the mic, Andrew, if you have any final thoughts before we go.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. I mean, this was very exciting. It was a very fun time. I'll definitely need to do this again. I know everybody's been asking about this for quite a while, so I'm glad we finally got the opportunity to do it. And I enjoyed all of your questions. And certainly I know there's tons more out there, and you guys can certainly message me directly on our Discord channel, and certainly between Phil and myself, we'll continue to answer all the questions that you guys have. I know you guys are a very thoughtful group, and we always appreciate all of your attention and support. So and Kevin, thank you so much for having me on this, and you guys have been an amazing partner to us, and looking forward to continue to grow that partnership in 2022.
Same to you, Andrew. Give everybody your Discord channel so that the people that aren't there yet know how to reach you.
Okay, yeah, should I drop it right here in the chat?
Yeah, well, you could drop it in the chat. You could also just say it out loud too, so that people know. Up to you.
Okay. I think it's a big number.
Good old Discord.
Yeah, I can actually grab the invite too. Let me do that real quick.
Let's see. Well, anyway, Andrew's going to pop that, I guess, into the chat, so you guys will be able to see it. So you can interact with him on Discord. You can interact with me on Telegram. You see, actually, where are we? I always do bad at this. Right here, you see my name. Hopefully, I'm pointing to it. At Kevin Murcko. That's on Telegram. That's on Twitter. That's pretty much everywhere. So when you guys want to interact with me, have at it, or at CoinMetro on pretty much every platform out there. Thanks, everybody, for coming here, asking your great questions. Thanks, Andrew, for the great answers. And absolutely, we're going to continue to work together. I think we're definitely headed along similar pathways, and that's super cool, not just for us, but I think for everybody else. We're trying to help humanity in some way, shape, or form. So thanks again, Andrew. Thanks, everybody out there. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and see you guys tomorrow on CoinMetro's AMA, where you'll see my face, unfortunately, one more time this week. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Estonian time. Catch you guys there. Cheers.
Happy New Year, everyone.